Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. On the podcast feed, Lesmerises, Bill Landis. We are breaking down a lot. We got a big show planned for you. We watched Bill, Ohio State's first practice of the preseason on Thursday morning, and we are going to talk about play calling. We're going to talk about quarterbacks. We're going to talk about sort of the state of quarterbacks nationally and where Ohio State fits into that. We're going to talk about Sonny Styles, and I am tempted to talk about Sonny Styles right now, but we're not going to do that, because I know that you and I could do like 40 minutes on Sonny Styles right now because he's in a new spot and everybody's excited. And the thing that you and I had talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on the air, off the air, but it's like, are they going to play Sonny Styles? And it was like, yes, they're going to. There's always a thing, Bill, like on the first day of the spring, first day of the preseason, is there a guy in a spot? Is there like a aha? I feel like I can still remember like the aha of when Tyvis Powell was going to be a starter. I was like, oh, and like the aha of like, oh, Darren Lee's just going to be a starter. And those moments. And so I'm getting off track already. I thought like my biggest aha was Sonny Styles, who he was with and where he was. And then we can tease people on that. But did that aha you?
Yeah, it did. And I'm not often correct in my assessments of what I think should happen, but that was me being right. Assuming that carries throughout the rest of camp, that was what we saw, was what I envisioned for both Sonny and the people he was with, as I thought about how they would utilize the safeties.
I'm not sure I'm going to let you say that, because there was something else that happened on Thursday that you were like, well, I said to do this 3 years ago. How come they don't listen to me? So don't act like you're not right about stuff. Like there's a part of you. It's like, okay, we're going to do this show. Doug's going to talk. He's an egomaniac. And here's Landis. Everybody loves Landis. He's your friend and mine. He's Mr. Steady, dry wit. And now you're coming in with the humble, well, I'm not right a lot of the time. And at practice, you're like, I called this 2.5 years ago. You know what I'm talking about. And you admit that you said that, right? You admit you said that on Thursday.
I did say that about Court Williams moving the linebacker, but I wasn't. I don't pound my chest with stuff like that, because I don't think I'm alone in those thoughts. I think there were a lot of people who thought that Court should and would eventually move down the linebacker. It's just taken 3 years when they could have done this back in 2020 if they wanted to.
I'm also tempted to do 45 minutes on Court Williams off the top, but we're not going to, because I do want to talk about play calling. I want to talk about Brian Hartline and Ryan Day, that relationship, how it's going to evolve. I asked about it on Wednesday when we talked to Ryan Day and the quarterbacks before the first day of practice. And then we saw some things play out on Thursday. And one thing that people have to understand is this was a new look practice, because for much of Thursday, they just operated 2 practices at once. And Ryan Day, everybody was like, yeah, Ryan Day, I said that on Wednesday they were going to do that. And I was like, what? I missed that. Ryan Day said that, and they did it. Can you explain, Bill, what we saw, why they did it, and that it was different, right?
Yeah, they have, what was the number, 120 players in camp, which is a little more than they normally have. And on top of that, they're healthy. I think maybe the only player that I saw that wasn't ready from the start of practice might have been Reese Stocksdale. Everyone else, I think, was present and accounted for and practicing. Tyleik Williams picked up a little thing like in the middle of practice, but he stayed out there at least. So they have 120 guys to utilize. And I guess on some level, it would feel a bit wasteful to just have 100 of them standing around while 22 were on the field actually practicing. So they split into teams of scarlet and gray. It did seem like there was a little bit of rhyme and reason to how they did it. Like most of the starting offensive line was together. I think the guys that you would say are defensive starters or key contributors were together. But then they also split up like Marvin Harrison and Emeka Ibuka. I think that was to create a sense of comfort for the quarterback. Those guys were bouncing back and forth between each field. So it was odd. I wonder how much that will carry out throughout camp, and how much of that was, we know that the media and 500 fans are going to be in the building watching us practice. So we're not going to do anything really that tips our hand, particularly as it pertains to the quarterbacks. We're going to have 2 fields going basically at the same time and have those guys bounce back and forth.
So yeah, it really was like first team offensive line, first team defense plus Marv. And then it was like a Mecca and Julian Fleming and sort of like second team offensive line, second team defense, but the quarterbacks flopped back and forth between that. So you could not get a read on that. We'll get into the quarterbacks in a little bit, but the field that had the starting offensive line, the starting defense, and Marvin Harrison Jr., that's where Ryan Day was. So that was Ryan Day. They're running the same script of plays, but Ryan Day is running the show there, and Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, and then some other staffers. The other field was Brian Hartline running the script with Tony Alford, the running backs coach, Keenan Bailey, the tight ends coach, Corey Dennis, the quarterbacks coach. So he had more of his dudes over there. So it was like sort of like Day and Fry, and then four guys at the other field. But it was a mirror situation. So it was like, oh, who's the play caller at practice? It was, well, they both were the play callers at practice because there were two fields operating simultaneously. And back in the day, if Ohio State had wanted to do that, they would have had Ryan Day doing one field and Kevin Wilson doing another field. So it's not like they never had two guys capable of doing this before. But do you think we, in talking to our loyal Ohio State listeners and fans and educated, dedicated, loyal Ohio State listeners that are joining us here on Kings of Columbus, have we made it sound like the decision of whether Ryan Day is going to call plays is going to be either Ryan Day keeps it or Ryan Day hands over to Brian Hartline and just sits in his office and has meetings with guys? Have we made it sound like it might be like that? Or have we know we've been smart about it? We've lived in the gray area and talked about nuance. How do you think people are understanding the choice there?
Yeah, I don't think we've spent enough time on the potential nuances of it. It's sort of been like an either or kind of conversation. The Ryan Day is either all the way in it or he's all the way out of it and he's doing other stuff. I don't know if I personally have believed that much over the course of talking about this going back to last January. But I would say that maybe on here or perhaps as a beat or as people who provide the kind of information to Ohio State fans, we probably could have talked a little bit more about like, hey, maybe this is some sort of hybrid approach to this because that's what it sounds like it's trending toward. No, or I guess maybe it's not, but that's the vibe that I got on Wednesday.
Get ready. You have not seen Oppenheimer yet, right? I don't want to ruin it for you because you have a baby, so you're not allowed to leave your house. But you are going to go see Oppenheimer because Steel Chambers gave a 7-minute review of Oppenheimer during his linebacker interview on Thursday to the point that somebody was like, sorry to interrupt with a football question. So in Oppenheimer, one of the things is they're going to, they blow up like they have a big bomb. I'm not spoiling it, right? It's about a bomb.
I know that part. Yeah.
Yeah. It's about a bomb. So they're getting ready to do a bomb. And there's a part where a guy puts on sunglasses and slathers his face in sunscreen to protect himself against the radiation. Because that's all you need, like a 15 SPF and you're good to go. But that's like a thing. It's going to be a meme, I think, the slathering. So we are going to slather you, Landis. If you had seen the movie, you'd know what I was talking about. And you could do a bit for the people watching on the YouTube show. Because if you're listening on the podcast, we're so grateful. But if you want to see faces, I have a monkey behind me. You can see Landis's office. We also have a YouTube platform. You'd be slathering yourself in nuance right now. Get ready to be slathered in nuance about how I think this actually is going to work with the play calling decision for Ryan Day and Brian Hartline. Because Ryan Day had a quote that basically said, the easiest part of this whole thing is calling the plays on Saturday. That's last. It's name the things, top 5 answers on the board, name the things an offensive coordinator must do. Number 5, ding, is call plays on Saturday. He is talking about, it's about deciding the plays that you're going to install. It's about organizing your staff to make sure that they install it properly. It's about organizing practice to make sure that everyone knows in the moment that things are being done the way you want it. Then watching the film and making the corrections, identifying your best players and figuring out how to get them the ball. Those are all direct quotes from Ryan Day, basically, right? That's what takes all the time. That's what I am very interested in Ryan Day not having to do, because then he can do a bunch of other coach stuff. But that's the hard part. So what I am anticipating is that I do think, my guess is that Brian Hartline will call plays Saturday against Indiana in the opener. I do think Brian Hartline will have the play sheet and he will have that responsibility, but they'll all be on the headset. Ryan Day can overrule, Ryan Day can suggest, but I bet you Hartline calls it. But I think where the nuance is, Bill, is during the week, running it, picking the plays to install, because it's Ryan Day's offense. So it's not like Brian Hartline's coming up with plays, but that offensive meeting room that I sat in last year, they just have these magnets on the wall. It's all these play grouping. It's all the types of plays they want to run within different formations. It's just Brian Hartline plucking those. It's the Ryan Day system. I think Ryan Day, though, is going to keep a handle on a chunk of that during the week stuff for a while and gradually hand it over. And then also, like, maybe if it doesn't go so great, he can have more of a hand in play calling against Notre Dame if he needs to. And I do think what's going to evolve is his involvement, his hours during the week. And I think that might ebb and flow. I think that he will gradually give up more, but I think it is not black and white. And the phrase that I use with Ryan Day is it a clean break? And he said, it's not a clean break. How are you envisioning all the things that go into this beyond just the Saturday play sheet stuff and how Ryan Day will handle it?
I was trying to figure out, like, his mentioning that, and he did it on Wednesday and he did it at Big Ten Media Days. And in my head, maybe I should have asked it, but I was thinking to myself, like, are you talking about this because you thought it wasn't good enough in the spring, or it's just a reminder of how difficult this job actually is? Because I think all we've talked about is play calling. That's been the shorthand for this, and everything you just laid out. It's much more than that. So I think I agree with you. I think that Ryan Day will still have a fairly heavy hand early on in everything Monday up until Saturday. And then he'll give the play sheet to Brian, and Brian can make the calls, because that part is easy to take back. I think Ryan Day, can roll out of bed and call plays. It's the preparation that is the difficult part, and it's the thing that Ryan Day is like really good at. Like I don't know that he should be out of that entirely. I think he should still be a part of that process. To what extent, I think, is the question, and I think it's probably more or less looks how it's looked his previous 4 years as head coach early on, and then the hope is that he can slowly pull back from that. I wonder too if, I don't know, Youngstown State week, he just says like, "Hey Brian, it's all yours," and to see how it goes, because that's a low stakes game. You can probably call the same play over and over again and win that game. Just to see if Brian Hartline, I guess, like has the chops to do all those things during the week that Ryan Day has talked about being so important and so difficult. I wonder if that's on the table, but I don't know that I ever thought that it should be a clean break for Ryan Day. I wondered and believed that more should be taken off of his plate, if at all possible, as he handles everything else that is involved with being a head coach. So this hybrid model, I guess it is, of I'm going to help you out during the week. I'm going to do my thing. Saturdays, you're calling the shots. And as long as you can handle that, we'll gradually give more to you and take more away from me. I think the way that's how it's going to go.
I think that's right. And if you think about this, right, they play on Saturday, they come back in on Sunday, watch that game film, start talking about stuff. The players are off on Monday, and that's when I think the coaches on Monday, they have the run game people think about, okay, how do we think we want to attack this opponent now, the next opponent? The run game people suggest some stuff. The pass game people suggest some stuff, and they get together. Then on Tuesday morning, I think they talk about it some more, because the thing is, you have to actually figure out the game plan. You have to know what plays you're going to call on Tuesday, because you have to practice the plays that you're going to call. So we've had this. I just got to be in the room for 2 hours, and I just was, right. We're always like, hey, how big's your playbook? And it's like, the book is the book. It's just the pages and the chapters that you choose each week. But they don't call a play on Saturday that they didn't practice during the week. So you have to figure out what you want to call against that opponent before you practice on Tuesday, because then on Tuesday, you practice it. And then you come in and watch film on Tuesday evening and figure out, what did we run well? What didn't we run? And then you say, we ran that terrible. We're throwing that out. We're not calling it this week, right? The thing that I'm interested in is, I don't think Ryan Day's time is best spent Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evening, sitting in that film session after practice for 2 or 3 hours, going over every single play they ran. So the more I want him out of that room, so that he can talk to the defensive players, so that he can meet with the defensive coaching staff, so he can talk about NIL, so that he can game plan, so he can culturize, right? So I think that to me is where a lot of the evolution will come. Maybe he used to be in that, like his first 4 years as the head coach, he was in that room, like I think every night, the whole time. So I think any time that you can get him out of there, even if he's leaves half an hour early, that's a half an hour he gets back to coach the rest of the team. That I think is what matters. That's where I'm particularly interested. That's where it's not a clean break. The more you trust Hartline and Justin Fry and everybody else, the more you can leave that room. And that I don't think is going to be, I think that could change week to week, but eventually he won't have to be in that. Urban was in that room some, but Urban wasn't running the offensive meeting. Ryan Day was. And I guess Tim Beck was. Do you think Tim Beck was running that meeting? Tim and Ed back in the day, it's like, hey, Tim and Ed, what do you think of this play? Or do you think everyone was like, not
them? I'm sure they were running the meeting. How effective they were at doing so, I guess I have questions about. But yeah, I'm sure they were running the show. I'd imagine this current version of the show is much more organized and probably a higher level of offensive discussion.
There are some people like listening to this who are like, yeah, no, it's Doug's thing. Tim Beck's one of his things. And then there are some people who maybe have never heard me before who are just loyal The podcast listeners who are like, what? That's a side swipe. That's a foundational bit of what I do here. So that's what matters. That's what I'm curious about. I think what we see reflected publicly in practice and especially on Saturday is important, but it's not the most important. So I want to keep asking questions during the course of the year, Landis. I want to know, Ryan, after practice on Tuesday, were you in that room? Were you in there for 2.5 hours? Were you in there for 2 hours? Were you in there for an hour 15? What did you do when you weren't in there? Like, I can't actually ask questions like that, I don't think, during the course of the whole season, but I'm super interested in it.
Can we get like Ryan Day a time card? Just have him punch it and send you the form every night.
Yeah. No, I wanted follow him around and be like, oh, and what did you do when you weren't in there? Because that's my belief. I think they have a better chance of beating Michigan on the last Saturday in November if he doesn't spend quite as much time clicking through plays after Tuesday practice. That's all. Okay. I think what's more important to this Ohio State season? The play caller or the quarterback?
The quarterback, I think. And that is assuming that the weekly planning for the offense will mostly go off without a hitch. And there's just so many answers in this offense that I think, it's not easy to make sure to fall into calling the right plays, but I feel like it's kind of difficult to screw up. And the quarterback is a pretty giant question mark, even though there's a strong track record of that position being very good under Ryan Day. It's still a question mark. So I think that the quarterback play and that quarterback's ability to execute the plays that are being called is more important.
I asked you that question because I have 3 more things about play calling that I forgot I wanted to say. Before we leave the play calling topic, Ryan Day said they spent hours and hours and hours before the Minnesota game, CJ Stroud's first start in 2021, to get a great first play for CJ. They thought that was really important. And I went back and I watched it since he said that. And he just said it was like a little hitch for Garrett Wilson. It's nothing. It's off coverage. CJ takes a shotgun snap, does like a 1.5 step drop. Off coverage, Garrett runs 7 yards down. CJ hits him in the chest. It's a 7-yard gain. It's like the easiest thing you ever saw in your life. But that's how much they put into it because it was a new quarterback. That's how much it mattered. Like, that's the play caller, right? That's Ryan Day he was the head coach. He felt so responsible. They wanted a perfect play for CJ Stroud. Second play, false start, by the way. Second play was a false start and completely threw him off. Then they had a little short one to Jackson, got a first down. They took a deep shot to Garrett Wilson, and he just missed him. But Garrett probably also maybe could have caught it. So anyway, that's the kind of detail of Ryan Day play caller that really matters. And I would just like Gus Johnson, 19-year-old CJ Stroud. And it's one of do I have a Gus maybe coming a little bit? 19-year-old CJ Stroud. Yeah. I didn't even practice that. I have to practice. Okay. because I lost a lot of the people. That
you have the cadence.
Yeah,
you have the cadence for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll workshop it myself not when I'm on mic, but like that. But that's how much it matters. And Ryan was also talking about like they put too much on CJ in the Oregon game. They lose to Oregon in week 2 in 2021. CJ throws for 350 plus. They're down at the end of the game. He misses a throw on the sideline, like as a last chance kind of thing. He maybe, year 2, CJ Stroud maybe leads a game-winning drive there. But it's like he said, it wasn't CJ's fault. We put too much on him, right? Because we weren't good enough defensively. We weren't good enough at other things, mostly defensively. That's the kind of thing like that. That to me is like play caller Ryan Day talking, which shows me how important that play calling aspect is. And the other thing, and I can't remember where I saw it on can we still call it Twitter? X? It sounds ridiculous to say, oh, I saw this thing on X. It sounds like a lunatic to say that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm calling it Twitter. They can come arrest me if they want to.
Do you think they would? They might knock Mr. Landis. I have a baby. I'm sorry, I'll call it X. I saw it on X. That's ridiculous. Now it sounds like I saw it while I was on drugs. Is that not a street drug?
It is a street drug, yeah.
It's like, were you studying football while on street drugs? It's like, no, I was just on social media. They call it that now. So I saw somebody on X say that the most important relationship in a football building is the play caller and the quarterback. And I was very interested in the idea of, well, what if Ryan Day is not the play caller anymore? What will that relationship be? And he was very clear. He's like, no. Ryan Day and the QB, starting QB. Because have you felt like the last couple of years, Ryan Day is the quarterback's coach of the starting quarterback, and Corey Dennis is the quarterback's coach of the backup quarterbacks. That's always the impression that I got, because CJ Stroud would be like, oh, every morning I text Ryan and Day and I text each other at 8 a.m. And it's like, okay, we know who the quarterback's coach is. It feels like even if he's not calling the plays on Saturday, that relationship, I thought was pretty clear. Ryan Day wants to keep a tight relationship with the QB, and on his list of ways to spend his time, that still makes sense to me.
It makes sense to me too, but I also feel like the two go hand in hand. Like the relationship with the quarterback and the existence, I guess, as offensive coordinator and play caller and offensive organizer, like all kind of feel the same to me. At least the way that he's done it. So like that is the part that has always made it difficult for me to believe that he was ever going to truly let it all go, because I don't think he can do that unless he stops being the quarterback's coach, which I don't think he's ever going to do. And I don't think he ever should do, because if he ever did, I think Ohio State's quarterback recruiting might get a little sideways. If people could sell, like he's no longer your position coach. So, yeah, I think the two are closely tied together. He's going to have to find a way to make it not the case, I suppose, eventually. But if I'm Ohio State, I don't want to live in a world where Ryan Day is giving that up. That is the secret sauce, I think.
I think it's more important for Ryan Day to stay connected as the pseudo quarterback's coach than it is for him to be the offensive coordinator play caller.
I agree with that. I just don't know if they can ever be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. It is funny because, like, when you talk about all this stuff, it's like, okay, Corey Dennis is the quarterback's coach. Brian Hartline is the offensive coordinator. Todd Fitch is the quarterback analyst who's in the room there all the time with Corey Dennis. And Ryan Day is the quarterback guru head coach. So whenever any of the quarterbacks, they're always like, oh, I was talking to coach blank, blank, blank. They have to list 4 guys every time, because that's how those are all the guys who are in the quarterback's ear now. It's an interesting dynamic of how all this fits together, because Kevin Wilson previously was an offensive coordinator with Ryan Day. So it was sort of like Ryan Day and then Kevin Wilson was next. Now it's Ryan Day and Brian Hartline is next, but Kevin Wilson was run game. Kevin Wilson, it was very, even when Ryan Day wasn't the head coach, I think it divided very nicely. Ryan Day leaned more pass game. Kevin Wilson leaned more run game. And I thought like Kevin Wilson was like the consigliere of the run game. Right, that Ryan Day was still in charge of everything, but with Kevin Wilson's offensive line experience, his offensive coordinator experience, he really leaned there. Now Hartline's expertise duplicates Day's expertise. Yeah, you see it from a receiver standpoint instead of quarterback, but it's still pass game, which is why Justin Fry, I think, becomes even more fundamental. Maybe that's why Fry was tied to Day at practice on Thursday, because it's like, okay, We need to have pass game, run game. And then on the other field, we can have pass game, run game because we have Hartline and Corey Dennis, but then we have Tony Alford doing run game stuff, right? That it's just, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just a little like I understand why they're going to Hartline. I get all of it. It's not a perfect meshing of responsibilities and expertise, maybe the way that Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson actually really worked out well together. And even Ed Warner and Tim Beck, one was an O-line guy and one was a quarterback guy, even though that was, as some would say, terrible. At least they meshed together while they were terrible.
No, I think, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I guess, yeah, you can mesh terribly. Yeah. If you can mesh terribly, I think I'd agree with that. I think I'm not like worried about it. I don't want people to think that like, at least I'm not sitting here like concerned about what's going to happen with their offense. I'm more just curious about how it's all going to work out. I just think there's too many smart guys in that room who've been working together for too long for them to like do something that screws it up. But there's some new rules that need to be figured out, I guess. But I think like Justin Fry is basically like the new Kevin Wilson, and I think can be like a better version of that too. So I'm not so sure that like this isn't an enhancement for the offense either.
The like CEO kind of head coach that if Ryan Day ever, and I don't know that I'll ever get there, but it's like Bobby Bowden driving around in a golf cart is what it's like. Okay, like you coach the coaches, you don't really do it, that, hey, there's two fields, but the head coach isn't coaching any of it. Like that, I'm culture, I'm leadership, I'm motivation, I'm big picture scheming, but I'm not out here calling the plays like that. Ryan Day is like 30 years away from that, maybe like 78-year-old Ryan Day might get there.
Unless he just goes to the NFL where the existence is more of what Ryan Day has been the last 4 years. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what his interest is in golf carts. So we'll have to check on that. So that's the thing.
Oh, actually, yeah, they have some new golf carts. They have some new golf carts over there. They're using for recruits that he was pretty excited about. So he might be a golf cart guy.
Oh, for real? There's maybe they'll sell a spot like you can be on the back of the golf cart while Ryan Day drives a recruit around as part of an NIL package. Be on the golf cart. Ryan Day will drive you around. They do drive around. That was like the big thing when Wyatt Davis visited. Urban Meyer drove him around in the golf cart. Usually I think they used to put like a lackey would drive the recruit in a golf cart, and Urban was like, I got this. And Wyatt Davis was like, sign me up, baby. Isn't it funny what comes down to? It's like, well, the other school, they had a quality control guy drive my golf cart. Okay, drive my golf cart. We have to find the thing. Oh, you want to drive my golf cart? Right? When we used to do this together, we had like a thing that we did when like you would say a thing, and it's like we would have a thing that we would say. So we have to work on that, right? Don't we have to find a thing for that? Drive my golf cart. Kings of Columbus. Yeah. Let's talk about the actual quarterback battle. Who do you think won the quarterback battle on the first day of practice on Thursday?
Tristan Gebbia.
Listen, now this is another thing. Get ready for this. Everything you say to me off the record during practice comes on the record on this podcast. I walked over to you and I said, what is the % chance that Ryan Day says, the heck with it, I trust Gebbia? Is it 0% or 1%? And you said 0. And now you can't come on here and drop Gebbia on everybody.
It is 0. But he had, I don't know, he threw the ball fine. I thought that it was like throughout all of spring, I don't know that I felt a tremendous or felt like I observed a tremendous difference between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. And I kind of felt the same way on Thursday. So I don't know if you saw it differently, but like just watching them both go through a lot of like routes on air and some 7-on-7 stuff. I don't know. They kind of seem the same to me. I understand why Ryan Day might think it's close, and I don't know if you really start to see any kind of separation until you start to get into those true scrimmage settings that are still a week or so away.
So this is where I'm here to lean on you, because this is how I watch. The first time you get to watch practice in any session, whether it's spring or preseason, that first practice for me is nothing but depth chart. I'm just walking around going, First team offensive line, second team offensive line, first team safeties, second team safeties. Okay, now in this drill, is it the same or is it different? So I have no idea how anybody looked. Did they look good? Did somebody make a mistake? I have no idea. But my notebook is filled 400 different times with first team offensive line, second team offensive line. So I'm relying on your quarterback expertise. So you're saying it was not decided on Thursday. You don't think that Ryan Day names a starter Friday morning?
I do not think Ryan Day names a starter Friday morning. The one thing that I did feel like stood out to me was there were times in the spring where I thought Devin Brown, from like a mechanical standpoint, like if he had three successive throws that you got to watch, like all three would look different and come out a little different. One would be accurate, one would be a little off, one would be widely inaccurate. I thought throw to throw, he was a little more consistent on Thursday, which I would take as a mark of progress for him. Kyle McCord, I think in this was more steady in that regard and remained steady on Thursday. Neither one of them was perfect, but if there was a place where I felt like maybe Kyle's a little bit ahead, it's like consistency of mechanics and throwing motion and accuracy and like what type of ball to throw. And I thought that Devin Brown, I don't want to say he's like totally closed that gap, but I felt like I did notice a little bit of, I feel like I noticed that he did close it a little bit. It's not entirely close just yet.
Again, trying to characterize things for our audience. Do you believe this to be a completely wide open quarterback competition right now? Or do you think, and I'm not saying like unjustifiably, do you think Kyle McCord came in with a lead, with an assumption, with a he's a year older? Or do you think Ty, the guy who plays the best over the next 2.5 weeks, is going to be the quarterback?
I think my mind has changed on this probably like in the last week, because I think if you would have asked me that before Big Ten Media Days, I would have said that it is more of Kyle McCord's got a lead and he's got to kind of seal this thing up. And I think that is like not seeing Devin in the spring game, just being removed from it a little bit and not talking about it as much. But then like once we got back into it and talked with Ryan Day about it at media days, and I got to watch practice on Thursday, talk to those guys on Wednesday, it felt more like a real quarterback battle to me again. Like going into the spring, I thought it was that. And then I felt like at the end of the spring, maybe it wasn't. But now I'm like kind of back in that initial mode of where I do think it is pretty wide open. Even if Kyle McCord has a advantage, I don't know, might be the right way to put it, just by being in the program a year longer, understanding the offense a little bit deeper level. That to me is not something that is insurmountable for Devin Brown. Like Kyle McCord has played some, he's not played a ton. He has a one start. It's against Akron. I just don't think there's a lot there that's blocking Devin Brown. If he puts together like a tremendous 2 weeks, I think he can win the job.
Help me try to parse the way Ryan Day talked about this on Wednesday. So for people to understand it, we talked to Ryan Day, Devin Brown, Kyle McCord, and Tristan Gebbia on Wednesday before practice started. Then they had the first practice on Thursday. And then after that practice, we talked to Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, and the linebackers, Tommy Eichenberg, Steele Chambers, Cody Simon, CJ Hicks, Reed Carrico, Gabe Powers, Court Williams, who's now a linebacker, guys like that. So the things that we're hearing from the quarterbacks and Day are before practice. But Ryan Day, in talking about this and in talking about like what he's looking for, cited things regarding Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, and CJ Stroud. And the thing he cited specifically for Dwayne Haskins was the way in the Maryland game, in that, I don't know, what was it, 86, 85, that game at the end of 2018, the week before the Michigan game, he finally ran the ball in that game. He made some plays with his legs he had to make. That's what Ryan Day cited. He didn't cite Dwayne Haskins threw for more yards than anybody in Ohio State history. Justin Fields, he cites taking the hit in the Clemson game and then coming back and throwing 6 touchdown passes. But he cites the hit and the toughness of Justin Fields. And then CJ Stroud, he cites the Georgia game, and I know exactly what he's citing, because after that game, I followed CJ Stroud and Ryan Day out into the hallway, and it was the play when CJ Stroud shook off the sack and threw the touchdown pass to Marvin Harrison Jr., and Ryan Day had a spasm. Like he lost control. He was shaking like a maniac on the sideline. And I said that to Ryan Day. He's like, yeah. And he like looked at CJ and was like, yeah. He saw it. Like, that was the happiest that Ryan Day ever was with CJ Stroud ever. The smart, like super smart CJ Stroud. Ryan Day, when he cites what he wants, he cites competitiveness and toughness. Is that because he's assuming the processing, the decision-making, the accuracy, that's a baseline? And then when he's looking for a quarterback who elevates, a quarterback who's a championship quarterback, a quarterback who separates himself in a competition, maybe that's what it does, but he's assuming the other things? Or do you think that could be, hey, because he got asked a data versus gut question about this. Do you think that Ryan Day legitimately could pick the guy who he thinks is the most competitive, toughest dude, and that's who's going to win this quarterback battle? Or if not, why does he go there? With all the touchdown passes, all the great decisions, all the in-rhythm throws that those guys have made for Ryan Day, why does he go there when he's sort of citing, like, what do you really want?
Well, because I think that is what he wants to use to ultimately decide this. But the question I have for that, because he says it all the time, it's like you don't know about that until you get into a game. So then how do you project it? I don't know. And maybe it goes back to what you saw from guys in high school, and you can quasi create one of those situations in practice, I guess, but it's not the same thing when the guy knows he's not going to get hit. So I don't know. I don't know how you gauge it in the settings that they're going to have to gauge it, assuming they're not going to take this into the season. But I do think, yes, I think that is the thing that he will use to decide this. Like Devin Brown and Kyle McCord can make all of the throws that are necessary in this offense. Kyle might have a little bit stronger of an arm. Devin might be like a little faster if he gets into the open field. In terms of like seeing things and understanding the offense and concepts, I think those are non-negotiables in recruiting. I don't think they bring guys into this program they don't think can handle that kind of stuff. So then it's you put them on the field, say, all right, may the best man win, and see who rises to the occasion from a competitive standpoint. And then I guess you try to use that and extrapolate it to what it might look like or how that might present itself when you get into a situation like CJ was in against Georgia, or Justin against Clemson, or Dwayne against Maryland. So I think it is probably the most important thing in this battle. It's also the thing that is probably most difficult to define. So I guess that speaks to the difficulty of actually picking the guy. But as much as he can, I do think that's what Ryan Day is going to fall back on when he makes this decision.
And he's talked about, he said he'd like a guy to win it in the first couple weeks. He talked about sort of that second scrimmage they'll have sort of about 2 weeks into camp or so. That's going to play a big role in this. It always does. You and I, again, you've figured this out, right? You can't say anything to me. If you don't want it on the podcast, don't talk to me off the mic. Because every human interaction I have and every conversation in my life is nothing but podcast fodder. We have not podcast on a regular basis together since 2018. I'm not sure I was like this back then. Maybe I was, but I am a walking podcast now. Nothing in my life matters if it's not for the podcast. Are you okay with that? Or are you going to stop talking to me off mic?
No, I'm okay with it. One, because I think it's entertaining, and two, because I forget stuff a lot. So
yeah,
I'm happy to be reminded of it.
Because your choice is either me say you said this thing, or me not say that and just take credit for the thought. So I'd rather give you credit for the thought. You and I were having a conversation about this quarterback situation. Do you believe it to be the case that Ohio State's backup quarterback this year will be the best backup quarterback Ohio State has had at least since 17, when JT Barrett was backed up by a combination of Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow? And that also perhaps the starter will be, I don't want to say the worst starter, but the least accomplished starter. Like, we're talking about gaps, the gap between the starter and the backup. And how would you describe what that gap has been? 2017, Ryan Day's first year as the offensive coordinator. JT Barrett's the starter. Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins are in the room. 2018, JT Barrett's gone. Joe Burrow transfers. It's Dwayne Haskins in 18. I don't even know who the backup quarterback was. Chug? Is that right? Chug in 18? Yeah.
It's Tate Martell, baby.
Ah! I actually was thinking about we should get him on the pod, and I think the two of us could get him on, but not now. I just blew it. Wow, that feels like that. I feel like I just stabbed you in the heart. Wow, Tate Martell.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was getting no offense to Tate Martell, but I actually think Devin Brown or Kyle McCord is better than Tate Martell, right? As a backup. So 18, that the backup will be better, but maybe like it feels like the gap is smaller maybe than it's ever been for Ryan Day. How do you think about that? And what do you think that means for the competition, for the way they'll use quarterbacks, for the way Ryan Day thinks about this?
I think I agree that the gap is smaller than it's like. With hindsight, you can maybe say that it was pretty close in 17. But I don't know that we didn't know that at the time. I think we made some assumptions about Dwayne, and like there were definitely conversations about Dwayne should take over for CJ after the Oklahoma game. Or for JT,
Dwayne made some assumptions about Dwayne.
But
at that point, Dwayne was like, I'm ready. Put me in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So like that was pretty close, I think. And now we know after the fact that it was probably closer than we ever imagined at the time. And frankly, the backup was better than the starter, it turns out. So, but this is close and this is different because there's so much unknown with both of them. Like even back then, like JT was JT. Like, yes, he was limited, but he was also a baller. And like, you knew you're going to get his best out of him, to whatever extent he could give that to you. The fact that both these guys are unknowns and that they do seem so similarly talented is a different beast, I think, than Ohio State has had under Ryan Day. And probably, I don't know, like even like Cardell's story is crazy, but like no one viewed Cardell and JT that way in 2013, I don't think. So I don't even know the last time it was like this.
Yeah. And so there's no reason to assume anything other than it will be fine and Ohio State's quarterback play will be at a high level. I just don't, there would be no evidence to be worried about that. I think it's possible that it might get a little more complicated than people are assuming, whatever that means. But I want to talk about where this fits in nationally, because during the course of Ryan Day's tenure, sometimes like they let you come in and talk to Ryan Day. And I can remember specifically before the 21 season, they had some people in. It's like, oh, you get to go in. I think you went in and I went in with Cleveland.com and we talked to Ryan Day. And one of the big things that we talked about then was Alabama's starting a new quarterback as a second-year guy in Bryce Young. Clemson's starting a new quarterback as a second-year guy in DJ Uiagalelei. And Ohio State's doing it with CJ Stroud in 2021. And they are the three top quarterback recruits in the country, but it's all new. And you're not exactly sure how it's going to go. And at that point in time, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, I think, were fair to say the three best programs in the country because Oklahoma can't play defense. And they went 2 for 3. I think that's fair to say. Like in terms of like championship level quarterback play, Bryce Young wound up as the number 1 pick in the draft and a Heisman winner. CJ Stroud was the number 2 pick in the draft and a 2-time Heisman finalist. And DJ Uiagalelei is the starter at Oregon State this year. So Clemson didn't fall off a cliff, but Clemson has not been Clemson the last 2 seasons. And I think if they had quarterback play at the level of Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, I think they would have been. Now, also, there are probably some things that they fired their offensive coordinator. They don't have receivers like Ohio State does. There are other things there. It wasn't just DJ. But I think in the end, when you think about that situation, 2 for 3. So sometimes when you get into a thing, it's like, I think people know, Ohio State doesn't have a perfect history of picking the right quarterback. Justin Zwick, Troy Smith, Joe Germain, and Stan Jackson, right? I mean, like we can like Cardale Jones and JT Barrett in 15, like they have not always handled this, and it has cost them at times. But it's very seldom like do they wind up with poor quarterback play. 2 for 3 is what I'm thinking about though. And now I'm thinking Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, the 3 best programs in the country right now, all with new quarterbacks. Georgia, I think, has more of a presumed starter with Carson Beck, who is a 4th-year guy, with Gunnar Stockton and what's the other guy's name? You got a guy's name
Brock
like Gunnar
Vandegrift.
It's all fake names down there. These are not the names of real quarterbacks. I don't know if it's quarterback witness protection system. Stetson Bennett is not a real person's name, and neither is Brock Vandegrift. They feel like Barbie characters. It's like, did you see Barbie yet? No, you didn't see Barbie yet either, right? Because you're a baby. Your wife saw Barbie, though, and she told you all about it.
She did.
Right? Yeah. Brock Vandegrift is Ken's best friend in the Barbie movie. It's like, hey, everybody, it's my buddy Brock Vandegrift. So their quarterback battle, I think, like Carson Beck is presumed, but Kirby Smart was talking on Wednesday, just like Ryan Day was, and it's like it's wide open, right? Bama, we don't know what Bama's going to do because they bring in Tyler Buckner from Notre Dame to compete with Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson, and we don't know how that's going to go. But I'm assuming 2 for 3. I'm assuming that this season, 2 of those 3 quarterback situations will work out in a way that will allow those teams to compete for a national title. And 1 will hold that program back. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair. Like, I agree. And like, I feel like I know who the 1 is.
Nick Saban can hear you right now. He can hear you right now.
Yeah. Like that to have like Jalen Milroe as a limited thrower, Ty Simpson as like a 5-star guy who apparently is unready to the point where you bring in Tyler Buckner, who is got some experience but is mostly unproven. That felt like a panic move to me. That felt like we don't think we have anything good here. Let's go get Tyler Buckner, who I mean I'll eat these words happily in a few months if I'm wrong, but I just don't think he's very good. I think their quarterback situation is a problem. And while there's uncertainty at Georgia and Ohio State, I feel a little bit stronger that both those programs are going to figure that out. Maybe Georgia to a lesser extent because they also lost Todd Monken, but I think that's also a program that kind of elevates its quarterback pretty well. So I'm not super worried about that. And I don't really have any fear that Ohio State's not going to have a national championship caliber quarterback out of either one of these guys. So 2 for 3 sounds right. And I think the 2 are Georgia and Ohio State, and then the 1 is Alabama.
What if Ohio State had brought in Tyler Buckner? Would you be like, oh, interesting, another veteran addition to the mix? Or would you be like, oh my God, it's on fire?
Yeah, I would have been like, uh-oh, this is not good.
Plus 215 Georgia national title odds at one of the phone things I'm looking at on the old sports book and the Ohio phone apps. Bama plus 600, Ohio State plus 650. So they're the 3 shortest odds for the national title. And I think one of the 3 is going to like not be. I think it's possible it's Georgia. I do think when you throw in the Todd Monken part of it, and I mean, because they messed it up before. They picked JT Daniels in 2021, and then he wasn't any good. And then Stetson Bennett was like, I went to junior college. I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here. And they were like, what about Carson Beck? And he was like, I'm literally right here. I'm not doing the voice. I left the voice behind. I really want to do it, but I'm not going to do it. So he was 3rd to start that season. Carson Beck was ahead of him. So Carson Beck got jumped by Stetson Bennett 2 years ago. And now it's like, oh, it'll be fine. 4th year Carson Beck, who's been waiting behind a former walk-on. It's fine. I think it's possible it's Georgia. I know Georgia's schedule is super easy, but I am not all the way there. But the one thing that Ryan Day did was soothed by the idea back then. Clemson was a little, it's DJ or bust. Bama was a little Bryce or bust. And Ohio State did have, Quinn Ewers was around then, right? And Kyle McCord was around then. And Ryan Day has always said that the one thing about this, and this is, I have to remind myself of this sometimes. If Devin Brown didn't exist, if after Quinn Ewers transferred after his year at Columbus High School, and was it Chambuca, majoring in Chambuca in his year at Columbus High School. What is it called? I don't want to promote it. What's
it's called kombucha.
Kombucha. So he just drank his weight in kombucha and he went back to Texas. And if Devin Brown had been like, I don't know, and they just didn't have a quarterback in that class, and it was just like, Kyle McCord's the quarterback, and be like, yeah, 5-star Kyle McCord, who's a 3rd-year guy who is literally exactly what I almost think people would maybe be more soothed by that, and that competition creates uncertainty. And Ryan Day always just says, like, I want options. Like too many. He says this a million times. People know this. When we're like, oh, what are you going to do? He's like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? The problem is if I don't have somebody good. This is better. In 21, he was a little bit like, hey, man, like Bryce is great. DJ is great. But like, if that doesn't work out, what are those two places going to do? We have more options here. He wants options. He's more worried when it's Justin Fields and nobody. So like all this stuff that is creating dialogue and is creating, oh, I wonder who it's going to be, is exactly, if Ryan Day doesn't have a returning starter, this is exactly what he wants. And in the meantime, people like me are like, I don't know what they're going to do, but it'll probably be fine.
Yeah, I think it'll be okay. I went and looked up too, because I was thinking along the same lines. I went and looked up and averaged the recruiting ranking of the 3 quarterback rooms.
Just now, live on the fly?
No, before, because I know we were going to talk about it.
That was some good math. If that would have been like live podcast math, I would have respected that. But I also respect the prep. Okay, that's good.
Georgia is the average national ranking of their quarterbacks is 130 overall, which is pretty good. Alabama's is 60, and Ohio State's is 36.
I think everybody in the country would take the Ohio State quarterback room in that situation, right? Nick Saban, it's like if Nick called Ryan Day, it was like, you want to trade quarterback rooms? And Ryan Day would say, first of all, you can't have Jebbia. Keep it Jebbia. He's not on the table. But Keenholtz, Brown, and McCord for Milroe, Buckner, and Simpson, Ryan Day would laugh, swear, tell Nick good luck, see you in the playoff, but no, like hang up immediately, right?
What if, can we throw JC Latham in the deal?
I know that's... Do you know, so like, you know, I was on the College Football Survivor show previously before I uprooted my entire life to come basically work with you. So thanks for that. So excited to be here. My partner Shahan Jeharaja and I did fake trades that should happen in college football. And I traded Bear Alexander from Georgia to USC. And like 3 days later, he transferred. I spoke it into existence. So you might have just spoken, like, let's look at our watches. It's like, could JC Latham transfer from Alabama to Ohio State by like August 21st? You might have made it happen.
I think I would trade one of those quarterbacks for JC Latham.
Because you would feel confident that Jebbia is your 2 and either McCord or Brown is ready to roll. And that's a step, like that's a significant step up at either tackle spot if you got 5-star JC Latham in here.
Yeah, and like a quarterback room that is 5-star riser, ready to go, veteran backup, young, exciting freshman, like is still a really good quarterback room.
If Devin Brown was at Alabama, do you think he would win the quarterback job?
Yes. Yeah. I think he probably won the job at both these places.
Yeah. It depended how much of the Barbie movie everybody at Georgia watched. If Ryan Day was just coming out of the Barbie movie and was like, I think Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandegrift were great in that movie. In the dance scene, I thought they were both tremendous. You know what? I'm into them. Otherwise, I think Georgia would take Devin Brown or Kyle McCord too. So that's the thing you have to keep in mind. But I think the other thing you have to keep in, but even like the Justin Zwick, Troy Smith thing got a little messy, and it did goof them up a little bit in 04. And then it was like, oh, then Troy Smith became like, it was fine. It worked out. And Troy Smith like tore Michigan apart in 2004. So it took a little time, but like, this is just, I think people, and we'll leave the quarterback discussion with this because Sonny Styles is calling. There's a quarterback discussion. There's a quarterback competition discussion. There's a play calling discussion as it applies to being in the playoff. There's a quarterback play calling competition, all that getting ready discussion as it applies to the Michigan game. And then there's a discussion that applies to the Notre Dame game in week 4. And I do think I don't think any of that stuff will hold Ohio State back from being what it wants to be in November or December. I think it could hold him back in week 4. I think it could hold him back on September 23rd because I think it held him back against Oregon. Right? And again, it's not CJ's fault. And that defense was bad that day. But that was young CJ, who coming off a kind of a rough first half against Minnesota and a very good recovery and a good second half against Minnesota in his first career start. And then that was week 2 instead of week 4. But that's part of this, at least in my mind, is there's the big picture discussion. And then there's the, are we sure all the quarterback play calling stuff is going to be in line in a way for them to win if Sam Hartman and Notre Dame are able to put some points on the board?
I think that's right. I think you can't be messing around with stuff going into that game. I think you have, even with a Big Ten road opener against Indiana, you have 3 weeks to figure it out. Whatever it looks like. But it has to be figured out when you go to South Bend. And like, can they win if it's not? Sure. But I don't know. I don't know if you want to find out. I don't know if you want to mess around with that and find out if you're Ohio State. I think you need to get all those kind of ducks in a row and figure out a plan. Probably ahead of that week. Maybe you want it the week before. So you got to have like 2 weeks to work through it before you get to that game. But I don't think you can go in there thinking like, oh, well, we don't know how much Brian and Ryan are going to call the plays and like who's going to do what. And we don't know if Kyle or Devin is actually our starter long-term. Like that is an issue when you go play a game like that.
Before we leave quarterbacks, I'll pin you down on this. What is the % chance that in the first 3 weeks, both Devin Brown and Kyle McCord start a game for Ohio State? Or if not start, both play significantly in a real way that it feels like the competition is continuing?
I think that the same person will start. So I say almost 0% chance that both start a game. But I would say, I don't know. I think it's better than 50-50. I might put it like 60% chance that they both play meaningful snaps in the first few weeks of the season.
I thought in the end that the way Jim Harbaugh handled the Michigan quarterback situation last season was masterful, that he took it into the season. And I think sometimes if you are trending toward doing kind of the unexpected thing, the idea of, listen, we're going to test it, but also show it to the world. Mm-hmm. We're benching the playoff quarterback because we think J.J. McCarthy is better. We're going to take the job away from Cade McNamara, but we're not going to do it in the shadows. We're going to do it in the spotlight. We're going to start Cade week 1 and J.J. week 2, and then you can see what we've been seeing. And also, we're double checking that if JJ folds in the spotlight, okay, we're sticking with Cade. But if he does what we think he's going to do, you'll see what we see, and it's like, it's got to be JJ, right? I think if you are trending toward doing the unexpected thing, and I don't know that it was unexpected last year, but it was a little clunky because you're benching a playoff quarterback. I think you want to show it. So if you're pretty sure it's Kyle McCord, like if it's McCord, all playing Devin Brown does is complicate things. Mm-hmm. If you think it might be Devin Brown, first you got to check it because he didn't play in the spring game. Second, you want to show it because people might be like, I can't believe he's doing this. How is he doing this to Kyle McCord? What are they doing? And then if it's like, well, if Devin shows, if that's, we're leaning Devin Brown. Let's show the world. And then if he keeps doing that, it's like, oh, okay. So I think a scenario where I don't think Devin Brown becomes the starter, snap your fingers smooth. I think that's more of a process. I think if it's Kyle McCord, it's like, it's Kyle McCord. We'll give Devin some reps against Youngstown State and Western Kentucky because that's what you always do, right? But also you don't want to like crack the door on that because you've sort of, the obvious thing has happened. So I think the way you would arrive at the two guys might be in very different ways.
Does their schedule allow them to do the Harbaugh thing if they wanted to, or is there enough with like a Big Ten opener on the road against Indiana and Western Kentucky might throw for 500 yards against us?
So Western Kentucky, I think, is potentially significantly more of a real test than Indiana is. Like, people think Austin Reed's like one of the 15 best quarterbacks in college football. Like, he might throw for 400. Yeah. And you might Like Ohio State might give up 27 to Western Kentucky. They might have to score 42 to make sure that they get some breathing room in that one. Indiana might score negative points. I don't know. Tom Allen might get fired at halftime of that game. I can't believe what Indiana football is. But I do think Indiana and Youngstown State gives you an opportunity. Like if you're truly taking it in, like we don't know. It's not decided. I think you could. If you wanted to Cade and JJ the first 2 weeks, I think you could, given the schedule. Do you think they could or no?
I do. I think they could. I don't know. Indiana's defense, the thing that would worry me, I guess, is like Tom Allen literally blitzing 11 people on every single play because that's their only chance they have of winning that game or not getting their doors blown off. Not winning that game. They have no chance of winning that game. But so that would give me a little bit of pause, but like it's all on the road, but it's not a true road environment. Like if going to Minnesota on a Thursday night was actually like, turns out much more of a solid road test than I think maybe anyone anticipated it would be. This is not that. So I think it's enough of a cupcake that they could do it if they wanted to.
All right, let's go to defense. And we've waited an hour. This is how we do it here. The podcast daily, boom. 3 dudes hanging out. Hey, everybody's having a good time. This is like homework. This is like homework. Like I've tried to think about it. It's like the podcast is like a network. It's like a streaming service. And so maybe when you go to Hulu, maybe you want to watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And Landis is on that show because he's from Philadelphia. He's always sunny. And then maybe you want to watch like To Catch a Predator. And that's what this show is. I don't know. What would this show? This is like it's like a slog. It's like a TV, like a Hallmark movie. I don't know. I'm watching How I Met Your Father on Hulu, which is because I really liked How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Father is the worst television show that I've ever seen in my life. It's the worst acted, worst written show I've ever seen in my life. And I make myself watch it, and I'm not sure why. Sonny Styles. How worried were you about, oh no, Sonny Styles is really good, and I'm not sure if they're going to play him?
I was concerned about it. Worried might be too strong of a word. Like 1 to 10, probably less than a 5, but not a 0. So it was in my mind, and I felt reassured when we got out there on the practice field on Thursday.
Not reassured. No. Give me a better adjective than reassured.
Vindicated.
I like vindicated because vindicated is as much about you as it is about Sonny Styles. Yeah. It's like, I was right. Ecstatic, jovial, thrilled.
Yeah.
Like it's over. So I really grasped in the spring onto Jim Knowles saying, dominate the twos. Like, if you want to show me something, dominate the twos. Because Josh Proctor was running with the ones all spring. It's kind of like, what are you doing? And he's like, dominate the twos, and we'll see what's up. So I asked Jim Knowles about that on Thursday. I said, you said dominate the twos. I talk about dominate the twos all the time. The story of my life is dominate the twos. Talked about it all spring. Asked him on Thursday. Dominate the twos. Is Sonny an example of that? And I think his answer might have been, yes. It's over. Sonny Styles is a starting safety for the Ohio State Buckeyes and is going to play like a starter. And if I'm going to give Jim Harbaugh credit for handling J.J. McCarthy, and I thought J.J. McCarthy should have played more in 21. I thought they should have gone to J.J. McCarthy in 21. They didn't, and they made the playoff with Cade McNamara. And they made the transition to J.J. McCarthy in 22, and they made the playoff. So I think handling talent is real. That's a real thing. Handling a team and talent. I'm prepared to give Ohio State a lot of credit for the way it has handled Sonny Styles. From early enroll, find out where the bathrooms are, get your feet wet, bowl game roll, right? Big nickel, 20 snaps against Georgia. Real run in the spring, but almost all with the twos. And then the first day of preseason camp, he's a starter, and I think he's going to start every game the rest of his life in Columbus and play 90% of the snaps from here until he leaves.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know. Like, I get what you're saying, but part of me feels like they could have handled it better in the spring. Like, because I just sort of always felt like this was coming. They put a 17-year-old on the field against Wisconsin in September. Like, they knew that this was coming for him. They knew that he was special and different. And you can like look at him in half a second, you know that's the case. Watch his high school tape, you know he's going to be a stud. But then they like went through the spring and didn't play him with the guys that he was likely to play alongside as a starter once the fall came along. Like I appreciate the idea of like dominate the twos and then we'll put you with the ones. I don't know if that should be universally applied to everyone when I think it was so evident from the start that like Sonny needed to be a starter for the defense this fall. And how detrimental is it that he didn't get 15 practices playing alongside Lathan Ransom? Probably not that detrimental at all. But it just to me to like, I don't know, make him earn it or make him prove it when I feel like we have enough body of work of from the guys who were above him, quote unquote, above him, to know that like they just aren't it. Like they shouldn't be starting for Ohio State. Not to say they can't help them, but I don't think they should be starting, at least not over Sonny. So I think they could have handled it better, but as long as the result is that he's going to play a lot this fall, I guess I won't be too upset about it.
I was not anticipating him being the nickel safety, and that's what he is now. And that is also part of it, because I think if he would have been running with the ones in the spring, it would not have been at nickel. Right? How do you think he was so this is the way it looked. They ran the safeties in clumps. And I think we can take this as the ones. Jihad Carter is the deep safety. That's the adjuster. I dislike the name. Lathan Ransom is the bandit, and that's kind of run around a little bit more. And Sonny Styles is the nickel safety, which means you're going to be lined up covering slot receivers. You're going to be lined up covering tight ends, but you're also down in the box a little bit more. And I don't think if Sonny would have been with the ones in the spring that's where he would have been. Or do you think that they should have gotten to that point in April? Because I that's not what I was expecting to see when we went out there Thursday.
Oh, good point. I wouldn't either. My thought in the spring was put Lathan Ransom as the deep safety, put Sonny as the bandit or strong safety, and have Jihad Carter, who played nickel at Syracuse last year, play nickel here. And I guess they've come around to the idea that Jihad Carter, who had actually played all three positions at Syracuse in a fairly similar defense, is better suited to play like a deep safety role than he is a nickel role, which I probably agree with, having watched him. I think that's probably right. And that Sonny can play nickel and Lathan Ransom can play that strong safety spot. So I would not have guessed that Sonny could be an all the time nickel, big nickel for sure. Like we saw it last year. He's a really good tool to use in a matchup against a big physical tight end. But like he was covering Marvin Harrison at one point during practice on Thursday. And I don't know that I would have ever anticipated that. I think that invites some like matchup questions, like, and I don't know who it would be. Like if Western Kentucky decides it wants to put Malachi Corley in the slot for the entire game, do they play Jair Brown or Cameron Martinez, or do they bump one of the outside corners into that spot? I don't know. Like you probably don't want Sonny covering him every snap, but those are few and far between, I think, on Ohio State's schedule. So I think Sonny can live in that world more often than not. And then if you need to move him around to the other two spots, you can.
They've certainly tinkered and brought up the idea more of that nickel being a corner skill set. And Jair Brown was there in the spring. I think Ryan Turner was working that a little bit on Thursday as well, that some of those like backup corners are working in. So yeah, but I said to somebody on Thursday, like, oh, so like Sonny can cover Brock Bowers, best tight end in the country, or Rondale Moore. Like I think the prototypical Big Ten slot receiver. They're like, yeah, like that's what they see most of the time. Now, if he's getting, and also he's the youngest guy, maybe in that matchup, right? And Malachi Corley. So people know this. Austin Reed, the Western Kentucky quarterback, they chuck it around like maniacs down there. So he's going to put up huge numbers this year. They're one of the best passing offenses in the country. But Bailey Zappi got drafted out of Western Kentucky, and I think Austin Reed has a chance to get drafted. I think he could have transferred to a Power 5 school this year if he wanted to. If Austin Reed wanted to be Nebraska's quarterback or Illinois' quarterback or Michigan's, he would definitely, Mel Tucker would drive. I don't even know where Western Kentucky is. Mel Tucker would bike to Western Kentucky to get Austin Reed right now. Tandem bicycle. Mel Tucker with nobody in the back on the way there. And then Austin Reed would ride back. But Mel Tucker would say, I'll do most of the pedaling if he could get Austin Reed. So that's a good, and Malachi Corley is an NFL receiver. So just like be ready, like Ohio State fans have to be ready for that. So yeah, but also if that's where you take Sonny off the field a little bit and you leave the older safeties on the field, Ransom's not coming off, Carter's not coming off. Maybe we'll go with a corner at times there. But I liked it because it felt like, was it in the spring that Josh Proctor was the deep safety and Sonny was backing up Josh Proctor? And I did not want Sonny Styles standing in the middle of the field as the just in case something goes wrong guy. I want Sonny Styles down in the box, coverage, run stopping, blitzing at times. That nickel safety can be like a third linebacker. That's a good blitzing position sometimes. If he's playing that, I feel like they've cracked, and it's the Isaiah Simmons idea of what Isaiah Simmons and Clemson had. Is like an oversized guy who kind of doesn't even play a position. He plays a game-wrecking position, but he's in the mix. He's not outside of things. He's in the middle of everything, breaking on balls, blowing plays up, blitzing. And I think at nickel safety, you unlock that. I think this is the best place to unlock. And I guess if you wanted to play at bandit too, but then I don't know what you do with Lathan Ransom. So I think this is the best opportunity to unlock Sonny Styles and potentially unlock Lathan Ransom, who, by the way, sometimes looks like a maniac running around the field too. Those are two potentially really, I think, game-wrecking safeties at their best. And then the guy in the back is Jihad Carter, who's like, I got this. I played college football for 3 years, man. We're good. I think this is the best solution. And I just don't know that they were going to get there in the spring.
Yeah, and it's fine. I think it's ultimately fine that they didn't get there in the spring. It was, I think it was like annoying on some level that we had to pretend there was going to be anything other than this. But it's because, like, I don't know, just like being honest, like Josh Proctor, I just don't think is going to start here. He tried to start him last year. He made one mistake. They benched him. He didn't play the rest of the year. Now all of a sudden he's going to be your starting free safety. I just didn't see it. And like Cameron Martinez is different. I think he's more of like a sub-package situational guy who I think actually can still help the defense. But I don't think he's an every down player for this defense. You went and got Jihad Carter for a reason, and Sonny Styles is a freak. Like, you have to play those guys. And I'm glad that we're here. I just, I feel like we could have preserved a lot of oxygen in the spring if we would have just been here on March 13th or whatever it was when they started spring. Isaiah Simmons, I want to read this off because it's my favorite. It's my favorite football stat, I think, of all time. In played 16 snaps at the defensive line, 209 snaps, 132 snaps of free safety, 262 snaps in the slot, and 13 snaps at corner.
You know who maybe should be your
Sonny
jack? Sonny Styles. How about Sonny Styles as your jack? It's like, what's on third down? What's happening? Sonny Styles is standing over the nose guard on third down. Good luck.
Yeah,
I'm with it. I'm there.
Well, I think he provides that for you. I think there have been, and I don't know there's been a ton of these guys at Ohio State over the years, but I think there have been players on the defense with whom they could get really creative and like aggressive and do some really fun things with. And I think the reason they don't always embrace that is because they just have a lot of guys who can do a lot of things, and they'll roll multiple people out there to do different jobs as opposed to letting one guy just go wreak havoc doing a bunch of different things. I hope that they embrace that with Sonny, because I think he can do it. I think he'd be a terror if you lined him up on the line of scrimmage and made him an edge rusher. I think he can cover most tight ends and probably a lot of wide receivers. I don't know if I put him at corner per se, but he moves pretty well. He's only 220 pounds. Like, he's not 250 out there trying to contend with those guys. I think he can play effectively at all three levels of the defense. And my hope is that now that they've settled on the fact that he should be starting and playing a lot, that they also try to utilize him that way.
I think it should give hope, even if it took longer than maybe you would have preferred. They got here, I think, from a rep standpoint, from how much he's going to play and how they're going to use him. I think I'm taking it as like a good sign for how this defense thinks. And we have often had ruthless discussions about like playing young guys. Like you gotta, when you have a guy like this, what are we doing? And okay, it's settled. And at times that has not always been the case at Ohio State. It has felt sometimes like, for as high level as their recruiting is, sometimes it's hard for some guys to break through when there's an old guy in front of them. And that was the fear in the spring, and that's been washed away. But right, have you had that fear? At times that fear linger for you?
Yeah, it definitely has. But I think the combination of seeing Sonny out there on Thursday, and also what Ryan Day has said a couple of times now about paring down the rotation on the defensive line, leads me to believe that they are getting to the place where I like them to be, which is like, play your dudes. You don't have to play everybody. You don't have to play veterans because they stuck around. You play the guys that are the biggest, the fastest, and the strongest. It's college football. That's usually wins games. And I would hope that this means they are embracing that.
For the podcast listeners, I am just realizing this. And again, I'm kind of new to this. We got fancy stuff here at the podcast, because you tell Jeremy Birmingham something. You say, Berm, here are words that I would write on a yellow legal pad. And he turns them into a graphic. And the thing he wrote for this is, it's always sunny for Ohio State defense. I didn't even realize that when I made the always sunny in Philadelphia Hulu reference earlier. So I have not, and I've only watched the first episode of that show, and it's very vulgar. It's even me, I'm old and vulgar. It's almost a little off-putting. The pilot of It's Always Sunny. You've had to watch it. Probably you watched it in high school as some kind of assignment if you were in Philadelphia, right? You've watched the whole thing.
You know what? I haven't. I mean, I've seen the pilot. I've seen a lot of the episodes. I am way, way behind on that show. My brothers like watch it religiously, and like, I'm in a text group with them and they're always talking about it. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm still in season 6, and they're like 17 seasons into the show now. Yeah. So I have a lot of catching up to do, but I do like it. Especially now that I don't live in Philadelphia anymore, and I haven't lived in Philadelphia since 2011. It helps connect me to home, because it is vulgar, but that's what I'm used to.
It is. The vulgarity is what makes you miss home.
Yeah,
the Landis household. One of the guys on that show then did a show where he was a science teacher in Toledo. And that show I watched, it was more of a gentle humor, and it was based in Ohio. And I just kept waiting for Dave Briggs or Kyle Rowland to show up on the show. Hey, everybody, we have a sports writer coming in to speak to our AP physics class. Actually, it wasn't called AP. It's called AP Bio. It was a biology class. AP Bio. That guy's in it. So anyway, okay. Speaking of young guys, Ryan Day mentioned Luke Montgomery's name at Big Ten Media Days last week. And it's what does that mean? Luke Montgomery, freshman offensive tackle, as we try to figure out who the Ohio State offensive tackles are going to be. And then on the first day of practice, Luke Montgomery was the second string left tackle behind Josh Fryer. So, no, you know what? I was going to say, let's talk about left tackle first. They're too connected, because tackles are tackles. And I think if they decide by 2 weeks into camp that Josh Fryer and Luke Montgomery are their two best tackles, then one of them is going to move to the right side. So let's talk about them together. On Thursday, Josh Fryer, every single snap I saw, starting left tackle. Luke Montgomery with the 2s. George Fitzpatrick there, but seemingly third. Right tackle, Zen Michalski with the 1s more often than not. Felt like Tegra Shabola with the 2s, and San Diego State transfer Joshua Simmons with the 3s. Is that what it felt like to you? And what did you think of that order on Thursday?
I would say, yeah, that was mostly how I saw it. I think I would say maybe that Josh Simmons was maybe more rotating with the 2s than he was with the 3s. It was Zen. Did feel like Zen got the most of the first team reps at right tackle, but Tegra got some, and whichever one of those two was with the 2s at the time, Josh Simmons would rotate him with them. I don't recall seeing Josh Simmons take any first team reps at right tackle, which I guess is not surprising at this point in the game. He still has his black stripe. He's new. He's got to earn it. There's an adjustment period for sure for him coming from the Mountain West. So I don't think I was surprised so much that that's the position that he was in, but Ryan Day talked like fairly extensively about the tackles at Big Ten Media Days and never said the name Zen Mahalski. And then we show up to the first day of camp and he's the first team right tackle. So maybe that was just a little bit of a brain fart on Ryan's part that he didn't say that name. Like, you're talking about a lot of guys all day, you forget to say names. That's fine. That happens. But I would have anticipated going into that, based off the way the position was talked about the week prior, that Tegra Shabola was going to be the first team right tackle, and that Josh Simmons and Zen Mahalski would be like either rotating in with him or like rotating it too. So that was a little different. Left tackle, not surprised to see Josh Fryer take all of the first team stuff. It was Luke Montgomery was better positioned than I would have anticipated. I think I took Ryan Day's talk of Luke Montgomery at media days more as like, we're trying to motivate a young guy. We think he could be important to the depth. And now I think he is a little bit closer to like scratching on that door to put something in someone's mind about like, is he maybe one of our two best tackles? And I don't think I would have anticipated that a week ago.
He looked pretty good in pass protection to me. He moves pretty good.
Yeah.
And in the name of spilling everything Landis says in practice on a podcast, you were talking about the idea that you think maybe they're going to run the ball, especially early in the year. And we're going to get to the running backs as the last part of this podcast. But especially with the young offensive line, every offensive lineman wants to run block more than they want to pass block. They want to get after somebody and be aggressive. Establish that early, especially maybe going into the Notre Dame game. And I could see that, but in the end, I think they're going to have to throw to win. And Luke Montgomery looks pretty natural there. Josh Fryer looks just like he's bigger. He's, I think, substantially bigger than Luke Montgomery. Doesn't he just look it? He's a little more of a mauler, I think, than Luke Montgomery is. But Luke Montgomery, I thought, looked pretty smooth with his movement. If I said, like, I think in the end, like, Josh Fryer might be a really good right tackle for this team. And that if the public gets to go to the Friday practice on August 4th, the media will not be there. And if we knew that, all the media would have bought fan tickets, but we thought maybe we were going and then we weren't. And I was talking, there is a media member whose mom and dad will be there. So we might get media reports from that media member's mom and dad. But then we should be back there for Big Ten Day on the following Friday, August 11th. And that's when I'm going to pay attention to more than just writing down the first team and second team. Because I'll be like, okay, now what's up? Luke Montgomery is a left tackle. Josh Fryer is a right tackle. Impossible, or cracking the door?
I don't know. I have a really hard time seeing them start a true freshman tackle, brand new quarterback. I think I would leave the door slightly ajar to the idea of Josh Fryer at left and Luke Montgomery at right. But I don't know if I could do it for the inverse or the opposite of that. That just seems like it's too risky. I don't know. And like Luke Montgomery was a borderline 5-star prospect. Like, guys do it. I don't want to pretend like it's an impossible task. It's not. Like, really good, highly rated offensive linemen, and some guys, frankly, who weren't highly rated offensive linemen, start as true freshmen and perform quite well. So I don't mean to say that Luke can't do it, but with all the change they have happening on offense, like new quarterback, quasi new coordinator, maybe a new play caller, you're going to have to toss a true freshman left tackle into that mix too. I don't know. That would make me a little nervous.
So when you're watching the way that the linemen are aligned, and then when you're watching them practice, what are the sounds that you were making? Where it was like a lot of like, or like like just make some sounds to bring people. Let's take people to the practice field. What does Bill Landis sound like watching this Ohio State offensive line?
Yeah, I think it's more of that's interesting. Like, I think that's usually it. There's not a lot of histrionics involved. It's more subtle, but it's like, I didn't expect that.
And then I come over and say, do you think Tristan Gebbia could be the starting quarterback? And you say, please leave me alone. I'm watching the offensive lineman. And then I leave. And then you say to somebody like, what is with that guy?
That is not dissimilar from an interaction I had at practice on Thursday.
Bill, I saw Tristan Gebbia complete an 8-yard pass. Do you think he'll be the starting quarterback? Please leave me alone, Doug. I'm watching football. It's kind of our dynamic a little bit. That's why I wanted to do a podcast with you again. I'm intrigued. I don't want freshmen, but it's like, how much have you thought about if Paris Johnson was 3 years younger than he is? Like if Paris Johnson, I think like Paris Johnson got here and lost the starting right tackle job to Nicholas Petit. Brandon. No. Yeah, no. Nicholas Petit Frere as a freshman, right?
No. So Paris was a freshman in 2020, and I think Nick had started the year before that. Brandon Bowen started in 19, and Nick Petit started in 20.
Nick Petit lost it to Brandon Bowen in 19. Then Nick Petit beat out Paris in 20.
Yeah.
At right tackle. So Paris Johnson, who was not a starter as a freshman and played guard as a sophomore, if true freshman Paris Johnson was here, would he be starting at tackle for Ohio State this season?
Yes.
Yeah, he would be. Sometimes you're just born the wrong year. You know what I mean? Like you're an old soul. You probably should have been born in like the 60s. So they could use young Paris Johnson now. But so it's a question of like how close could freshman Luke Montgomery be to what freshman Paris Johnson would have been had they let him play tackle. Okay. It backed up what Ryan Day said in Indy, which was interesting. So it wasn't just a name. It was actuality. For even a true freshman to be in the 2 deep at tackle is a big deal, especially when there's some uncertainty there. So I'm still on alert for some shakeups. But for now, Josh Fryer backed up by Luke Montgomery at the left tackle spot, Zen Michalski at right tackle with Tegra Shabola and Joshua Simmons behind him. Let's wrap this up with running backs. And the last thing, I think we should just call the whole podcast Things Landis Said at Practice. You said something about Dallin Hayden at practice on Thursday that I thought was interesting. What did you think of what you saw from Dallin Hayden, who ran for 100 yards against Maryland last year and then kind of disappeared, but is in the mix right now?
I thought he looked more explosive. And I know he added some weight in the winter to get to this spring because he felt like, and I think Tony Alford and he had these conversations, like, I don't know that he wore down, but there was a thought that perhaps he wasn't as sort of like sturdy and strong as he needed to be if the situation arrived where he would have to be a week in, week out Big Ten running back. So he wanted to make those physical gains, and he looks like he did. But in addition to that, he just looks a little faster, a little quicker. Got to the edge quicker than maybe I thought he did last year. Planted his foot and got kind of vertical on a run a little quicker than I thought he did last year. And maybe that's making too much of a couple of vignettes in practice, but I felt the same way in the spring too. He just looks like a little bit better athlete than he was last year. And I thought he was pretty good last year. So like to see him do that, to see like a healthy Travion Henderson, to see a healthy Mayan Williams, to say nothing of like Evan Pryor and Chip Trainum. And this is obvious. I suppose we've talked about it a lot over the last few months. Like not only are they deep at running back, but I think the top three being Travion, Mayan, and Dallin, have a chance to be like kind of special, maybe. Like, and you got to figure that out and how to use them and the touches and all that. But it's pretty impressive to see like the three of them out there together, and then sort of wonder what that could do for the offense when you have not only a deep stable of running backs, but a top end that's as talented as this one looks like it could be.
It felt like last year was a worst case scenario for the run game in 2 different ways. One was Ryan Day got in his own head about trying to run the ball. And more importantly, actually, was the fact that they all got hurt. And by the Michigan game, they were playing a linebacker at running back. And combine those 2 things, and it was a mess. You think the run game could be what this season, both in its effectiveness and how it's deployed? What are you expecting?
I would say like maybe like more forward facing than it was last year. Like in 2019, they still threw the ball a ton. They threw the ball a ton. Like the receivers ate the way they needed to. Justin Fields' passing numbers were great, but they ran the ball a lot. They ran the ball like as much as anybody but the service academies that year. I don't think that's what they're trending toward now, but I think that they could lean on it a little more probably early on with the new quarterback and the offensive line going through a transition. I think like Justin Fry can put a little different spin on it and bring some different things to the front. Maybe there's more quarterback run game involved with that. It's not just about the running backs, but I do think as long as Ryan Day, to your point, is not like in his own head about proving that they're more physical than whatever team they're playing that week and just sort of letting it come to them naturally and embracing running the football more, but in like a healthier way than they did last year. I think it could be a pretty solid running game. Like I still think they're going to throw for more yards than they rush for, clearly. And like Marvin Harrison Jr., I think is going to get what he needs to get to be the best receiver in the country. But with Travion Amayan and Dallin, and if you want to throw Chip and Evan Pryor in there too, there's a way to really weaponize that position that I think makes the run game something the offense can like rely on rather than just having it be like a thing that they decide to do every 6 plays because they feel like they need to run the ball.
So in 2019, J.K. Dobbins ran for 2,000 yards. Like workhorse back, stud, clearly the dude. They needed him, and he came through. Last year, Georgia had 3 running backs that they used. For the season, Kenny McIntosh, who I just thought was a great player, 456 snaps for Georgia. Threw the ball a lot to him. Dejon Edwards, 308 snaps. Kendall Milton, 191 snaps. So the percent of snaps that those guys played for the year, Kenny McIntosh played 42% of their offensive snaps. Dejon Edwards played 29%, and Kendall Milton played 18%. In their last 3 games, the SEC championship game and the 2 playoff games, Kenny McIntosh played 96 snaps, Dejon Edwards 51, Kendall Milton 46. Kenny McIntosh played 45% of the snaps, Dejon Edwards 24%, Kendall Milton 22%. So there's some snaps where they're like the 4th string guy was in or they were empty. There's no tailback in the game. So it doesn't equal 100. But by the end, when it mattered at the end of the year, it was basically Kenny McIntosh played half the time, and then Edwards and Milton each played a quarter of the time. When it's winning time this season for Ohio State, when it's winning time against Wisconsin, against Penn State, against Michigan, in a Big Ten championship game, in a playoff if they make it, could you see a world where 3 backs have real roles in this offense somewhere along the lines of what Georgia did last year and they did a similar thing the year before?
Yeah, I think I can. The one thing that makes Georgia a little different, and you mentioned it, like Kenny McIntosh was a really good receiver out of the backfield, and Ohio State doesn't do a ton of that. So if they were to embrace maybe probably Trevion Henderson more than anyone else as more of a receiving threat and got him some touches that way, then yeah, I think you can see a scenario where the 3 of them, and the 3 in my mind would be Henderson, Williams, and Hayden, can do something similar to what we saw from Georgia last year. I think the 3 of them are similar enough that you don't have to fundamentally change how you run the ball for them to be effective, but also different enough that they provide a little something different for the defense, different kind of challenges when you throw them out there. So I'm not worried about their ability to like coexist or thrive within what is like the base offense. So yeah, I think, and I think it would be better for everyone. Like Trevion Henderson, I think the biggest question with him was like durability, and Mayan Williams like broke down a lot last year too. I think anything to take a little bit off of their shoulders and balance that workload, I think benefits everyone in the long run. If you can get to the end of the season with all those guys healthy, just think even think about last year. If they were in the Georgia game with either Trevion Henderson or Mayan Williams being healthy, is it too much to say they would have won that game? Like, I don't know. I feel like that could be a difference in that game. Instead, they had to rely on Dallin Hayden and Xavier Johnson, and maybe the moment was a little too big for Dallin Hayden. And like Xavier Johnson, I think in an ideal world is not a running back. So the idea, I think, is to get to the end of the season with your best players available and a shared workload among those 3, I think, is the way you get there.
I think it almost matches up perfectly to what Georgia did last year, because I want them to throw the ball to Trevion. I want Trevion in space. I want Trevion with the ball in his hands without necessarily having to read a hole, without necessarily having to like break a tackle inside, right? Get the first, like the pass they threw him against Minnesota in 2021, that screen for a 70-yard touchdown, that all the time. So when you think about McIntosh and Edwards, so as I said, McIntosh, 456 snaps last year compared to 308 for Edwards in the Georgia backfield. But Kenny McIntosh had 150 carries. Edwards had 140. So McIntosh played much more, but they carried the ball almost the same amount. But as you said, McIntosh had 43 receptions. Dejan Edwards had 14. So let Travion be first up. Travion plays half the time, but a third of his workload is catching passes. I'm in. Then let Mayan Williams play a quarter of the time. But when he's in, you feed him. Like when he's in, he's not a decoy. When he's in, it's go time. Mm-hmm. Let's smash mouth some stuff. And then your third guy is Dallin Hayden. Maybe he plays a little less early in the year, right? Kendall Milton's load. I think Kendall Milton was actually injured for part of last year, but who's also recruited by Ohio State. His load is bigger at the end. You keep a young guy healthier and fresher because Dallin Hayden's time is coming, because there's a good chance that neither Travion Henderson nor Mayan Williams can be around next year. So you don't have to rush yourself on Dallin Hayden, but he gets a quarter of it too. And he's got a little more right? You're not going to pound. He can give a little more burst. You saw the burst on Thursday. Pass catcher who plays half the time, thumper who plays a quarter of the time, burst guy who plays a quarter of the time. We haven't seen it. Ohio State is either workhorse you, Ezekiel Elliott, J.K. Dobbins, you're the guy, or they split it. We've never really seen a thing like this before. But I think it might fit their offense. I think it might fit their personnel. And I think because here's the thing, what was the year, right, what was the year? There was a year where like Master Teague and Mayan Williams like switched off and on, like being the backup running back, whoever had the better week in practice, right? There was like some goofy stuff like behind with Trey Sermon, Master Teague, Mayan Williams, right? Didn't they all kind of play? But it wasn't like a split. It was more like who's hot. It wasn't like a designed plan like maybe Georgia does. So it was sort of like I don't know, let's try this guy this week. And also, no offense, Trey Sermon, Master Teague, Mayan Williams, I don't think is as complimentary. I mean, it took Trey. Trey was like nothing, 700 yards in the game. I don't know. A, do you like it? Theoretically. B, do you actually think it could happen this year on this team with these guys?
Yes and yes. And I also would like to see them, and this is a desire of mine every year, and I think we've seen it one time or not one time, but like 1 year in the years I've been covering Ohio State, and that is play two backs at the same time, which they really only did with Curtis Samuel and Mike Weber. Can we get a play where Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson are in the backfield and Mayan is lead blocking for Travion? I'd like to see that. I think it'd be fun. I think there's a way for all these guys to coexist, and I think they're always going to be a pass first offense, I think, right? And like you said, they're going to win with throwing the football. I think more or less that's how you win anymore in college football, is by throwing the football. But it's there, like it's there. I think you should lean on it a little more. Not lean on it the most, but lean on it more. And you have three guys who I don't think there's no doubt in my mind that all three of them can play. The other two, like, we'll see. Maybe they can give you a little something, but like that three-pronged rushing attack of Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, Dallin Hayden, yeah, like sign me up for it all day, because I think that could be something really fun.
I found the disappearance of Travion Henderson in the pass game last year to be so puzzling, and I feel like I asked Ryan Day about it in the middle of the year, and Ryan Day was kind of like, "Oh yeah, you're right. We don't throw the ball to him anymore." He played 508 snaps as a freshman and caught 27 passes. He played 281 snaps last year and caught 4. So it's like, of course, like he was hurt. He wasn't himself. He didn't play as much. He had 4 receptions last year. I think he's dangerous. Like, I have no idea what happened, whether it's swing passes, whether it's the screen game. I feel like when they work the screen game, like it's pretty effective, and it felt like it got abandoned. Like I don't know. I would love on my list of things if we did a podcast called "What are the things you would love to see this year?" Not even from a standpoint of you think it's the best way for Ohio State to win, just as like, oh, that guy, or I like that play, or that style, that formation. Throwing the ball to Trayvon Henderson might be number one on my list. Why do you think they stopped?
I mean, it must have been the injury stuff. I don't know. He had 26 last year, and maybe they're like, especially the way they use receiver, because he's not. There are running backs who can, and like they say it about the NFL guys, like if he can play slot receiver and running back, then like those are the running backs you draft high. I don't know if Trey can play slot receiver, but you can flip him a swing pass or a screen, get him in space and let him go. But I also think the nature of his injury last year, like maybe didn't allow him to do that as much or be as effective in it. And like the one time they did it, or at least so the one time I can remember them doing it, was the first touchdown he scored against Maryland, right? Wasn't that a screen pass? And he took it to house and he hurt himself. Like I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was probably the injury. I think it was probably the injury more than anything. But to go from 29 targets to 6, when it was a fairly effective weapon for them, he averaged over 11 yards per reception as a freshman on like a smaller body of work, granted, but like that's pretty 27 receptions on the year, 29 targets over the course of the season. Like that to me is a guy who should be getting, if he's healthy, I think TreVeyon Henderson's 30 targets next year.
And I do think a small part of it is that your running backs or your checkdowns are your outlets when nothing else is open. And CJ Stroud never wanted to take a check down. CJ Stroud was like, nope, I can figure this out. I think CJ Stroud thought checking down to a running back was giving up. And Ryan Day was like, please check it down. Like, by the way, like potentially the game changing play of the season is, I think it was a check down to Chip Trainum in the Michigan game, where he picked up like 25 yards, except there was a hold, and then G. Scott went bonkers and headbutted the dude. And it was like a minus 50-yard play. But that was a check down because he dropped it off to the running back, and there was all that room to run. So maybe the new starting quarterback, CJ was too much of a problem solver, like, give me the puzzle. He thought it was like, it's like, yes, there's 13 free yards here if I check it down, but it feels like giving up or cheating. I'm not taking it. And it worked for him. But I think maybe that'll be it. But you also have to game plan for it. Call a screen, man. Okay, there's a shot here. If it's covered, we're swinging it out to the back, right? Or we're setting something up. Because TreVeyon to me is a shot out of a cannon guy, right? That's one of those, because sometimes it maybe takes a second, but like if he gets 3 strides without anybody touching him, lights out. And sometimes that's easier to do when you're catching the ball than trying to, especially if you're trying to run behind Matthew Jones and Zed Mahalski or whatever. And it's like, well, we don't know how this is going to go. Just flip him the ball in space, dude. It'll happen, right? I would set the over under. Will we set it at 25 catches for TreVeyon this year, or is that wishful thinking?
I don't know. That might be, I might go under on that. Do I think it should be more? Should they try to get more? Probably. But if we're also talking about a world where we're trying to find a way for 3 running backs to share the workload, 25 might be a little high. I don't know. I think you're kind of on it. I think that could be the number.
I have gone from a place where I thought TreVeyon Henderson was a legitimate Heisman candidate in his career to thinking, no fault of his own, he's more like the leader of a good room. And that, like, Kenny McIntosh wasn't going to win the Heisman last year. And I thought Kenny McIntosh got drafted in like the 7th round. I thought he was going to go higher. You're talking about the guys, they love the guys who can be a slot receiver or a running back. I thought Kenny McIntosh was like the second most dangerous Georgia player last year behind Brock Bowers. But I just think I don't know that I don't be an All-American. I don't, because I think their room's too deep, and in the name of trying to keep, for 2 things. There's too much. The injuries did 2 things last year. It gave guys opportunity that all of a sudden Dallin Hayden should have done nothing last year. And instead Dallin Hayden was like, oh, okay, well, this guy probably needs to be in the mix. When we needed him, he actually did some stuff. And then also, so it gave guys opportunity that now deserve more opportunity. Unexpected opportunity now should be expected opportunity. And you saw what happened when you ran out of running backs. Your offense fell apart. So a timeshare that keeps guys healthy, keeps guys fresh. We want to get to the Michigan game with a healthy running back room. Also feels like, okay, well, then we're not going to give anybody 25 carries a game. So I just think Blake Corum or Braylon Allen or Katron Allen or Nick Singleton, I don't know that Ohio State will have a first team all Big Ten running back, but they might have a really good room. And I think in the end that might serve them better. And I wonder if it'll be what their future is or if it's just what it is right now. But I just think that's more where my head's never been all the way where it is now, thinking about a 3-headed monster at tailback, but it feels like the best thing.
I think, yeah. And I even if you look long term, they seem to be pretty keen on trying to bring in multiple backs in every class if they can. They haven't always done that, but I think that'd be ideal every year. And I think part of the reason is because they'd like to get to a place where it's a little bit more of a committee approach than handing the guy the ball 30 times a game like they did with JK. It's just really hard to do unless you're going to go out and get a guy like Braylon Allen who's 6'2", 230 and is just crazy durable in that way. But they don't really recruit running backs who are built like that. So I think this is the way. I'm curious if they actually embrace it. I've asked Tony Alford a little bit about it. We're going to talk with the running backs on Saturday. Maybe we can get more of a feel for that. But I do kind of think that that's the way they're leaning to utilize all the talent on hand, not just split it with Trey and Mayan.
One of the reasons that I was okay talking about running backs now before we get Tony Alford and the running backs is that Tony Alford isn't going to say anything. Tony Alford's least favorite topic is how are you going to divvy up the carries? He would rather talk about nuclear physics than trying to divvy up. It's we'll see. Someone will get the ball. When the quarterback turns around, somebody will be standing there. And then when the quarterback sticks the ball in his stomach, he will take it. And we'll go from there. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Tony Alford's least favorite topic was the Ohio State running backs.
I know. What was the thing that Jerry said on Wednesday? It was somebody was leaving the room and Jerry was like, oh, there goes. It was just an awkward thing where it was it sounded like Jerry was saying something about a player. It was just a situation.
Oh, yeah. He said there goes the most hated man in the universe because he wasn't calling on everybody and he was getting dirty looks from the media members in the room. But he said it as Tristan Gebbia was walking out of the room. We're yes. Are you talking about him?
I was how people hate third string quarterbacks, 7th-year third string quarterbacks. Oh, people hate that guy. It was no, it's very difficult. It's a big beat. Everybody wants to ask questions, and Jerry does a good job of calling on people, but he can never get to everybody. And then he said, he's standing up there next to the coach. So Ryan Day or the player at the podium is looking out at the crowd of media, 50 media in the room. And then sports information director Jerry Emig is standing there and they can see the look. It makes me feel better because I thought I was the only guy, the only person in the room, giving dirty looks when I didn't get called on. It's oh no, it's all of us.
Yeah.
So I feel better about that. I feel worse as a group. We're probably a bunch of jerks, but at least it's not just me. Is there anything else from the first day of practice on Thursday that is burning a hole in your brain and we did not bring up?
It's a good question. I think maybe the only other thing would be, and I did talk about this on Snap Judgment, so I guess apologies for anyone who's listened to that and is listening to this. I am more convinced that Carnell Tate is going to find something to do in this offense. Every time we've talked about him, it's been oh yeah, he's really good, but he's a freshman and they're loaded at receiver. How could he possibly get touches? I think they're going to find him touches. Is he going to be their third leading receiver? Probably not. But if the freshman last year didn't play at all, I think Carnell Tate is going to play far more than those guys played last year, and I think is going to be a guy who ends up getting 20, 30 catches next year or in the fall.
I like it. We have another Kings of Columbus episode planned to drop, we expect, on Saturday, and it is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. heavy, which is why we did not mention him very much on this podcast. But there's probably some other receiver things that we can get into on that podcast. It's also possible that you will catch a Buckeye Beefs from me in between this podcast and that one. That is where we take things that you guys are fired up about, things that I'm fired up about, and we let it rip. So if you would like to send me a Buckeye beef, you can go to my X. You can go to my X account at Doug Lesmerise, Lesmerises. In my X profile, I have an X link to the X form where you can send me an X Buckeye beef about what you're fired up about. And maybe we'll have a better way to get you, for me to get beefs from you without saying X 19 times. But for now, that's what we're doing because we want to hear from you guys. And I think you get fired. Sometimes it's like, hey, what are you fired up about? It's like, I don't know. Just trying to live my life, man. Figure out your own content. But then you hear us talk about practice. Maybe you went to practice because you got in and paid the $30 in the 90 minutes before it sold out. And it's like, oh, now this. Maybe you heard Ryan Day say something. You heard Jim Knowles say something. We didn't talk about Jim Knowles a lot on this podcast, but there's a lot of things. There's a lot percolating. So if it's on your mind, you can make a Buckeye beef. But we're going to start coming to you on more of a regular basis. And we know you guys are watching and listening to the podcast daily in the podcast feed. That's every day. We have the live show from Roosters on Monday. It is an avalanche of content. And here's the thing. Don't feel bad if you can't listen to all of it, because we're trying to give you different people, different lengths, different topics. And the goal is, in the end, to serve every kind of Ohio State fan. And I will say, Landis, for people who are familiar with me or are not familiar with me, I do have a bit of an ego. So I was looking at the Apple reviews in the podcast feed, just, if you don't want to say my name. And there was like one that was like, hey, Doug's here. And then the one under that was titled, I hate Doug Lesmerise. And I thought to myself, perfect. That is the goal. Not necessarily the goal to be hated, but like, if you don't like me, there is so much here. There is so much here for you to listen to that I'm not on. It's great. Or if you do like me, then great. Me and Landis are going to be chopping it up. So it's more like it's like a streaming service into itself, or a TV station, right? That it's like, hey, this is like the show at 8 o'clock and this is the show at 10 o'clock. And maybe you watch both, or maybe you only watch one, but we're still your network, the podcast. Watch us on YouTube, listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. And again, I'm so grateful to be here, to be doing podcasts with Landis, to be part of an association with Jeremy Birmingham and Austin Ward. It is a great place to cover Ohio State, and more is coming. Not right now, but we're planning. We're doing some stuff. We're making moves behind the scenes, Landis. And now, honestly, since I, like everything you say to me, I regurgitate on this podcast, at some point, we went long on this, maybe not now, but like I could reveal something to you in confidence about a move we're making, and then you could just talk about it on the podcast. And that would be fair play.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Or maybe I just might start making stuff up about you too. Like I might just say like, hey, today Doug said that Lincoln Keenholt should be Ohio State starting quarterback.
I am here for it. Absolutely here for it. It also took me 6 months to say Keenholtz instead of Keinholtz. So again, that maybe wouldn't be as realistic, but I'm sure there are things that you can make up about me that people will find entertaining. For now, we greatly appreciate you guys being part of this venture with us. Again, to reiterate, we are not the Kings of Columbus. It is a reference to the Ohio State Buckeyes. No offense to the crew or whatever else is going on in Columbus. I mean, it's fine. But it's like, that's a thing. So I just don't want people to think that we think that. We're not wearing crowns yet. Kings of Columbus in the podcast feed. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerise, and that was the Kings of Columbus.